thank you so much for joining us for this segment. We would like you, if you don't mind, to like, share, and subscribe when you're done, and don't forget to leave us your comments as well. Let's start back at the beginning. You and I met, I think it was almost 10 years ago, when you and Victor came up to the Unity Church here in Mesa to talk to a group that night. And when I saw Victor sitting in the front row at 7 feet tall, I knew there had to be some kind of a sports background. That's my background as a sportscaster. So he and I started visiting. I was telling him about our project, and I was looking for a male co-host. He says, well, you should talk to Barbara. Barbara knows everybody. And then you, in turn, gave me an introduction to Jeff Olson, which set this whole ball in motion. Let's go back to the beginning, though, when you were growing up in Oregon. What was your life like at that time?
Well, we were 5 kids, and we had parents who, my mom had lost her first husband in the Korean War. And so my older siblings had lost their dad. And then my mom remarried and had my little sister and I, and, rode my bike around the neighborhood with my sister. And we were wild little fun kids, and nobody watched the kids back then. You just had to be in by the time the street lights came on. So yeah, I did a lot of early life jobs. I mowed grass for people, and I pulled weeds, and then I started babysitting, and I always wanted to earn money, and so it was really, really kind of a cool early life. But then what happened was that I ended up marrying at age 21 someone from my high school, and he wasn't a bad person or anything. He just wasn't ready to grow up. And about 3 years later, after I'd had a baby, we went ahead and we separated and divorced. So I ended up moving up to Portland, Oregon, and I was working for AT&T Telephones, Pacific Northwest Bell Telephone, and I did customer service, and I talked with people all day long and taught them how to, I don't know, generate positivity in their contacts. And so that was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. And I ended up getting introduced to a man who started pursuing me, and he lived in Santa Barbara, California. And I ended up choosing to move down there because he wanted to marry me. So we got married down here. He owned a house. He had been married before, but his ex-wife and his daughter lived elsewhere. And soon after the marriage, I started seeing really severe signs of abuse. And he was frustrated with his work as a mechanical engineer, and he was a supervisor, and people were, frustrating him during the day. And I think it was a carryover from his childhood, a father that was abusive, but he began doing things, and I'd never been in a situation like that before, and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't want to admit to anyone that I was in that kind of a situation, so I didn't tell my parents or my friends or anybody. I just tried to meet all of his needs all the time. Every demand that he had, I just tried to do it. So,
well, I can see that from your perspective, because you're so amenable to be agreeable to everybody else and defer away from your own desires and wants. Before we get deeper into that story, though, let's circle back, because after you had your second near-death experience, which we'll get to a little bit later in the podcast, you had one at 18 months, but you didn't know until you had the second one when you started to investigate with your family. What happened to you at 18 months that really gave you this intuitive and psychic ability that you have to this day?
yeah, it was a situation where I had a high fever. I didn't get told about this whole thing until I was 55 years old. My two older brothers and older sister had been told by my parents never to talk to me about it. And my parents never mentioned it to me either. So when I was 55, my older brother disclosed that I had had a high fever. I'd gone into convulsions, and I stopped breathing. And he was there, and my father was calling the 911 thing, and my mom was told by my father, who had gotten instructions from the fire department, to put me into a bathtub with tepid bath water and to slowly add ice cubes. So my brothers were both sent out to get more ice cubes from the neighbors. When my oldest brother came back, he said that I was soft purple colored.
Wow.
And yeah, and I had not been breathing for a while, and I was lifeless, laying there with my mom holding me up to my neck in water. And he said, as he watched and handed my mom the ice cubes, she began adding them, and she was crying over the top of me and adding the ice cubes. And he said, you self resuscitated. All of a sudden, you took this deep breath in and you arched your back, and you then turned from purple to bright red again because your blood started circulating again. And he said, the ambulance people came in and took me off to the hospital, and I was there for 4 days. And he said, they were told never to talk about it. So I never knew that happened. And as a child, I had incredible incidents where I had intuition and things that I knew were going to happen. And I initially didn't realize I didn't say it because my mom would get freaked out. And um, I ended up learning to not say anything. When I knew that a car was going to crash right over there, then I just stood there. I couldn't do anything about it, so I just stood there and didn't bring it up. There were times when I did, and it freaked people out, so I stopped doing it.
Well,
So
and I think,
yeah.
when we have individuals who are younger who have near death experiences, obviously at 18 months, you're not articulating in full sentences, and the ability to really extrapolate what happened to you when you went there and came back here. But you had these abilities that you had to rein in for at least the rest of your growing up, your adolescent life, just for self preservation, right?
Yes.
Because it alienated your mother. But
Yeah.
when you finally got to the point where you went back to Santa Barbara, let's circle back to your husband. You identify the fact that you see some signals that there might be abuse involved. Take us up to and set us up with your second NDE and what was going on with your back, what precipitated that.
Yeah. It was my husband hurting me and damaging my back. He burst a disc in my lower back. So my L5S1 disc in between my vertebrae was blown out. And so it ended up at the hospital, and the doctor asked me to come in the night before. They were going to do a laminectomy, discectomy surgery the next morning. And they wanted to do one last test called a myelogram, and it was injecting iodine dye into the base of my neck back there. So they just numbed the area, had an injection, put the dye into my spinal cord, and then the x-ray techs that were in the room were supposed to tip the table so that the head went up and the feet went down, so the dye would, with gravity, flow down my spinal cord. Unfortunately, the two x-ray techs were talking to each other about their weekend plans. The two doctors were in the room, but they were talking to each other about the surgery the next day. And there was a nurse in the room over at the table doing paperwork. And nobody really realized that the x ray tech that was pushing the button on the table was pushing the wrong button. So he was lowering my head instead of raising it. And the dye was going right from the back of my neck into my brain. So I felt funny immediately. And I thought, man, am I supposed to feel like this? And I didn't want to interrupt the two guys that were talking. And I thought, oh, I don't know. This is really weird. Oh my gosh. And I was like sitting there, laying on the table going, oh no. And what ended up happening was that my eyes started rolling to the back of my head, and I started hyperventilating. And that's when the two guys heard me. And the guy who was pushing the button on the table leaned over my face and looked, and he saw my eyes rolling back and me hyperventilating. And he leaned back to see where his thumb was on the table, and he made this look like, oh my God. And that was the last thing I saw. My eyes shut in my body, and the next second, my eyes, or my, I didn't have any eyes up on the ceiling, but my vantage point was from the ceiling, and it felt like the ceiling was against the back of my head, but I didn't have a head up there, of course. But I was looking straight down at my body, and he had started calling code blue. So the room had started going into panic mode. And I looked down, and I was 31 years old, and I had a 5-month-old baby daughter and an 8-year-old son. And I looked down and I said, huh, if I'm up here and my body is down there and he's calling code blue, I think I just died. And right when I said that, I felt the presence of a being next to me that felt very eternal. I felt like I was wrapped in a blanket of love from this being and acceptance. And to me, it would be what you'd call God. So I assumed that's what it was. And I had always felt a really close connection to God, even though, I wasn't a church person. My parents weren't church people, but I always felt him in my life. And it was amazing because I had a grandmother who was a church person, and I just felt very connected with him. So here he is on the ceiling next to me. And I began saying in my thoughts to him, I really need to go back into my life. I need to protect my children. If I leave at this time in this way, I won't be there to protect them from the abuse that they'll suffer, and they won't grow up to be the good human beings they're capable of being. And so I said that about, I would say, 3 to 4 times as the whole group down below were, you know, chaos was happening down there trying to get me
Wow.
back. Yeah, and they brought in an oxygen cart, and the two x-ray techs had been doing CPR, blowing in my mouth and doing chest compressions. They put the oxygen mask on my face, so then they just switched off every 2 minutes doing chest compressions. The doctors were yelling out orders. The nurse over the table was calling on the phone for a defib unit, screaming stat into the phone.
Wow.
And this man came in and he had a box and he put it on this ledge next to the table, and he was peeling off these little white circles and he was putting them on my chest. I'd never seen a heart monitor before. And so I said to the being, and I kind of interrupted myself and said, I understand what everyone else is doing, but what is he doing? And then I was moved from the ceiling right in front of the box so that my vision was just like right in front of the box. And I watched the man's hand go across my vision and flick a toggle switch on the side of the box. And it caused this little light to go in this long screen of green glass. This light started going in a straight line going across. I didn't know what it was.
So
And
you
it was a
witnessed your own flatlining.
flat line. And it was the third time that it started going across that all of a sudden I realized, oh, I think that's supposed to be going up and down. Oh, that's my heart. It's not working. And the minute that I thought that, then I was back up on the ceiling again next to the being. So I ended up saying again that I wanted to go back. And the neurosurgeon said to the orthopedic surgeon, too much time has passed. She's going to be brain dead. We need to do something. And
Wow.
so the orthopedic surgeon said, stand clear. And he stepped by the table. He was like 2 steps away. So he stepped within, the table range. And then he took his fist from behind his back and he arced it over his head and he pounded it right in the center of my chest.
Wow.
Well, I watched that from up above. I watched my body kind of jerk from the blow, but I didn't go back into it. But up on the ceiling, the being then spoke to me. And in this beautiful voice said, but if you go back, you'll still be in your marriage. What will you do? And then showed me all these film clips that just went flash, 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 flash of all these incidents that my husband had been doing all the kicking, pushing, shoving, everything. And then up there gave me time to think about all the things that I had done to try to help him change. And I ended up realizing he couldn't change. It was me that needed to choose something different. I needed to get away. So I said, if you let me go back, I promise you I'll get strong enough to leave him. And the second I said that, then the doctor did the second blow to my chest and restarted my heart. And I shut my eyes up on the ceiling and I opened them and I had the oxygen mask on my face.
Well, I think what's so important about your experience and those that are similar to you is because people always say a near-death experience is so subjective. How do we have tangible evidence that something actually happened, that consciousness left the body, that it re-entered the body? But because you could recite verbatim what was going on in the OR, in fact, didn't one of the doctors storm out and said, I don't want to hear this?
Yes, I immediately said into the oxygen mask, what just happened? And the nurse said, stop, don't talk. We need to stabilize you. And then 20 minutes later, they took the oxygen mask off. And I said, what just happened? I was up on the ceiling and I could see and hear everything. And the neurosurgeon went, oh, brother. And then that made me recount. She was on the phone. That man brought in the oxygen card. I mean, that lady brought in the oxygen card. That man was bringing in the heart monitor. I watched it flatline. You said this, that, and so I recounted everything. And he got so freaked out. He clenched his fists up next to his body and went, "I'm not going to stand here and listen to this." And he stormed out of the room. So then the orthopedic surgeon, he stayed, and everybody else stayed. And the orthopedic surgeon took my hand and very calmly and gently, "What did it feel like? Tell me again what you saw." And he had me validate the whole thing. So he's a really nice man here in Santa Barbara. But the neurosurgeon, yeah. So yeah, so it was an amazing experience. And when I went up to my room after that for the surgery the next day, no one would talk to me about it because, of course, they thought they were going to be sued. And so
Right.
I never sued anybody. I just left the hospital 4 days later after they'd done the laminectomy, discectomy the next day. And I just proceeded on with life. But when I told the husband that I was married to that it had happened, he said, "Oh, that couldn't have happened. You probably hallucinated it." Well, I don't hallucinate, and I never did drugs, and I don't even do anything wrong. I work for the police department in Santa Barbara. I'm a volunteer there and have a clean background. And so yeah, it wasn't a hallucination. It was real, and it was amazing, and I love it that it's a part of my life.
Well, let's fast forward. So then it takes you 3 years to finally summon up the courage to get away from him, correct?
Yes, yes.
Then you go into the next phase of your life, which starts with a couple of remarkable manifestations based on your visualization for meeting Victor and then marrying Victor, and going to the bank to get a loan for a scrapbooking store that you had no idea that you were going to do. Can you just encapsulate that part of the experience for you?
Yeah, I really feel that near-death experience was planted to get me away from the bad guy. And then I feel the connection with the other side constantly, with them planting things happening in my life so that my life would be something that I'm very happy with. And so the near death experience was just the start, but I'd had things all the way back in my life where I'd had help all the way along. And it's been amazing. I've actually told people about different things, and they remember me telling at age 17 that I got my life saved. And it's amazing. So I ended up starting a store because I was told that I heard from the other side that I was supposed to start this store. I worked for the university. I loved my job. I didn't want to leave my job at the university, but I knew I was being told from the other side. So I went ahead, went to the bank, and within probably 14 minutes of walking into the bank, they gave me a $250,000 loan to open that store. And so I had it for 6 years. 3 months after I opened it, I was named Businesswoman of the Year for Santa Barbara, California, which is a pretty big deal. And I can see how that, and out at the university before I had left, I'd been named an unsung heroine for all the volunteer work that I had done in the community. I can see how the different things in my life were stepping up to kind of give me some credibility here in Santa Barbara so that I could talk about my near death experience. And it just unfolded one day where a woman that I was talking to I was friends with had somebody who was passing away in her life, and she ended up, I didn't even know it was called the near death experience for many, many years, like 13 years. I didn't even know what it was called. And I never investigated it or anything. I just kept it in my heart, just nicely secure in my heart.
Mhm.
And it ended up that this person I was talking to was having a mom that was passing away, and I ended up telling her about the near death experience, and she was the one who told me it was called the near death experience. There was lots of information online and I could search it out, and so I did. And so then I ended up getting invited to a conference by the IANS organization, which is International Association for Near Death Studies. And I went to the San Diego conference and met a lot of other experiencers, and I
And
kind of came out of my shell.
Dr. Jeffrey Long with
Dr. Jeffrey Long
Andrew.
invited me to that conference. Yes, from
Yeah,
NDERF, from Near Death Experience Research Foundation. He's an amazing
yeah, he
guy.
does
And
remarkable work. He
he
does.
does, you betcha. And so he's a very good friend now. And, I ended up opening up to the near death experience at the right time in my life. And luckily, I have this very supportive 7 foot tall guy who is my husband. And so I ended up starting a group here in Santa Barbara, and we've now been named the largest group for IANS on the West Coast. And we have, many, many people who come to listen to the guest speakers who I bring from all over the place. And who doesn't want to come to Santa Barbara?
That's
So I have
beautiful.
I have
Absolutely.
great speakers and a great group. And so I've been doing that for 15 years. And it's really a big part of my life.
Well, if you never get a chance to meet Barbara, you're really missing out. She's thoroughly one of the most positive, sweet people I've ever met in my life. She's
Thank
so
you.
giving, and it's very genuine. Your authenticity precedes you into a room. And I think with people like yourself who have had the near death experience, because it was so subjective, even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people would just look sideways. And a lot of people like yourself and the others on our expert panel and the people that we interview all the time say, when I came back, I had to reintegrate. I didn't really want to talk about it because people might think I'm crazy or think that, there's some kind of psychological issue involved. But now in the mainstream, we're finding more and more information about people, not only just experiencers, but clinicians and academicians like Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll, who's on our expert panel as well, willing to come forward and authenticate these experiences. Have you seen that evolution of this over time?
Oh, yes. And I am so grateful for it, for people like you and the podcasters that are out there and the people that are bringing this forward to the communities around the world. Because I mean, I've done a grand rounds talk at the hospital here in Santa Barbara, and the person who arranged it is a doctor, and he said that's the largest group of doctors I've ever seen gather for a
Wow.
grand rounds talk to listen to your near death
Wow.
experience. And
Well, I
so,
have a really good friend. I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to make this point. He is a pulmonologist, highly respected. And he says it's difficult for us because when we go to medical school, we get 10 clinical markers that may indicate someone has lung cancer, right? And they go down the different markers. And then when they run out of physical attributes, then they might start to examine the psychological or emotional component involved in disease, which dis is scattering, ease is harmony. How did your harmony get scattered? But I think more and more of them, like him, are amenable to listen to people like yourself and say, hey, we need to consider that in the treatment plan going forward. Have you ever had any residual issues though with your near death experience? You seem healthy as a horse.
yeah, no, I'm perfectly healthy. Yeah, and that's why I take care of Victor's cancer because I've got the power. So so yeah, I haven't had any residuals. I ended up having about 10 years after the laminectomy discectomy, I went to Los Angeles and I had a spinal fusion. So they put a titanium spacer in between those two vertebrae, and I've had no problems with it since then. And I'm only supposed to lift 15 pounds, but I can lift a whole big 5-gallon bottle of water with no problem at all. So I'm a power girl and I'm powering through life.
Well, let's talk about life, contemporary life in this country and all over the world. If you just look online at the different news outlets, it looks like we're going to the end times. And you're either on one side or you're the other. How do you marshal that type of attitude to not let it affect you? Do you just focus on what's in your immediate sphere of your eyeballs so you don't get caught up in all the drama all over the world?
Well, that's it. I don't get caught up in the drama. I don't watch TV. I haven't watched it since I was a child. I literally have never been a TV person. Um, I focus my life on finding ways to help other people. And I always ask God to put somebody in front of me that needs help for a little short period of time or longer help. And they become best friends or whatever. But the short period of time, people, maybe it's just something where they need something short and I need to take them to get some surgery done or something. And I just am a volunteer. And so I do that in my life. And I know that when I find those people that need help and I give that help, that I will see that at the end of my life that I contributed towards this person, that person, that person, that person in a positive way, and I'll feel good about those interactions. So that's what I focus my life on, and I don't want to. I'm sorry, whatever else is happening out there in the world, I can't do anything to make that change. I can only be in my circle and my people around me and the people that I know, the good person that I can be to help them. And so that's what I do. And I keep doing that every day. And my husband's very supportive of me to do that. And he's also a helper too. So
Well, you do it
um,
very well, and that gets me back to one of, I think, the catalysts of the near-death experience. Not having had one, but read thousands of accounts. The life review. You were just talking about these singular events where you touch somebody and make an impact in their life. And I know not everyone, but it's at least 50 to 60% of experiencers come back and recount their life reviews where they sit in what they consider to be like the sphere in Vegas, and
mhm,
every interaction they've ever had with any sentient being can be recalled viscerally. How I made you feel if I demeaned you or I was condescending to you, or in contradistinction, if I lifted you up selflessly. So is that what you're talking about? That type
exactly.
of an act?
Exactly. Yeah. I just feel it also makes me feel good immediately to help other people. I know that I'm doing something that that person needed to have help with. So that for me is a joy personally. And then at the end of my life, when I see my life review, I'll feel how those people felt when I contributed towards their life in whatever way that I did. And so that's the what I want to look forward to is that nice life review that I didn't hurt people, I didn't be mean, and I didn't cut people down, and I didn't, that kind of stuff is not, I don't want to do that. So, yeah, that's
That's,
it.
yeah, well, and I can testify, knowing you as long as I have, that that's who you live it. A lot of people say it, but you live it because
Mm,
the acknowledgement will be later, right? Or at the time that the act is happening, it makes you feel good to help other
yes,
people and lift them up.
totally.
Let's talk finally, give me some final observations for people like me or people out there who are listening who haven't had a near death experience. What is some of the wisdom that you gleaned from these experiences that you live daily that we could incorporate into our lives to live more joyously and navigably?
Well, we just talked about it really, is that, don't focus on what's happening out there in the world and get caught up with the drama and the trauma and the problems and the instead, how can you be helping to create, good things happening around you? And how can you contribute to the world rather than, be a watcher of all the negative stuff? How can you create some positive? So that's really the bottom line of a near-death experience is finding that you can be a change for good, and that maybe it's not, I'm not going to be president of the United States. I'm not going to be able to do that, but I am going to help in my ways, any way that I can in the areas that I'm in. And so that's what I really feel when we come into this earth, we come to grow our souls. We have a lot of things that we face through the
Mhm.
whole process of our life. And then we go back, as far as I'm concerned, to a place called home. I call it home. And it's not a judgment thing of going here or there. It's a place where everyone goes.
Right.
Everyone is loved, and everyone reviews their life and learns from the aspects of what happened in their life, how they handled this, how they handled that, who they were kind to, who they were not kind to, and they grow from that, their soul. And then I really think that we come back multiple times and have multiple experiences, both sides of the coin. One time we're an abuser and the next time we're the abused. So we find out what those aspects are and how to resolve them, and we then grow our souls until we are finally at a point where we don't need to come back anymore.
I think
So
that's wonderful advice. And again, it's just like my mother always says, it's the golden rule, right? So treat people how you want to be treated. We just get so myopic and caught up in all the drama that
yeah, yeah,
the vitriol, we join in. You don't have to join in. Like you
no,
said, you can remove yourself from the situation and focus on being positive. At
yeah.
the end here, I want to give you an opportunity to just let people know how they could get a hold of you if they wanted to, and especially if they're in the Santa Barbara area, if they wanted to attend one of your IANS meetings.
Yeah, the IANS meetings are always at the Unity of Santa Barbara location, and it's at 227 East Arriaga Street in Santa Barbara. And um, not Unitarian church, but it's just a very spiritual church. And it's a really nice place. And it's on the second Wednesday of every month from 7 to 9 p.m. And anyone is welcome to come and bring anybody that they want to. We just literally have open doors for everybody. And it's a great group. So I hope that they'll come. Yeah. And to contact me, I have an email address, Sunny, like sunshine. So SUNNY. And then the letters that stand for Santa Barbara. So SB. And then my first name, Barbara. So it's Sunny SB Barbara, BARBARA, at gmail.com. So you can email me if you'd like to.